It was January 27th, 2026, at 2:47 a.m. when a dream so violent, so consuming, drove me to the canyon rim outside Sedona, and there, surrounded by towering red rock walls that plunged into darkness below, ancient stone formations that had witnessed millennia standing like silent sentinels against the star-scattered sky, the cold desert wind carrying the scent of juniper and sage across the vast expanse, Jesus appeared before me with tears streaming down his face and said, "Jonathan, they think they're waiting to be chosen, but I've already marked them, and they're running from the very sign I've placed on their lives." Not everyone who sees this message is meant to see it. Some will scroll past, some will ignore it, but you've been marked. I need you to do something right now before we go any further. I need you to type your prayer request in the comments. I don't care how long it is. I don't care how impossible it seems, because what I'm about to share with you over these next few nights, what Jesus showed me out there on that canyon rim, it's going to change everything you thought you knew about being chosen. But I need to know you're serious. I need to know you're one of the ones who won't scroll past. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, I need you to understand something. This isn't about numbers for me. This is about gathering the remnant, the true believers, the ones who are hungry for more than Sunday morning platitudes. Hit that subscribe button if you're ready for the raw, unfiltered truth about what Jesus is saying right now, in this moment, to his chosen ones. Some of you know me as Jonathan Rumi, the actor who portrays Jesus in The Chosen, but what I'm sharing with you tonight has nothing to do with scripts or cameras or production schedules. What happened to me out there in that canyon, what Jesus showed me across 3 consecutive nights, this is as real as the breath in my lungs, as real as the cold stone I sat on while the temperature dropped to 38 degrees, and my hands went numb and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. Let me take you back to that first night. I couldn't sleep. For 3 days leading up to January 27th, I'd been wrestling with something, a restlessness in my spirit that I couldn't name. I'd pray and feel nothing. I'd read scripture, and the words seemed to slide off the page without penetrating. I'd sit in silence, and the silence felt empty rather than full of God's presence. You know that feeling? When you're doing all the right things, saying all the right prayers, but something fundamental has shifted, and you can't quite identify what it is? The dream that night was different from anything I'd experienced before. In it, I saw millions of people, and I mean millions, walking around with glowing marks on their foreheads. Some marks were brilliant, pulsing with golden light. Others were dim, flickering like candles about to go out. And Jesus was walking among them, weeping, reaching out to touch the dim ones, trying to reignite their light. But they couldn't see him. They were too busy looking at their phones, scrolling through social media, comparing their lives to others, wondering why they felt so empty, so unchosen, so ordinary. I woke up gasping, my heart hammering against my ribcage, and I audibly heard, a voice say, "Come to the canyon, now." I didn't question it. I threw on jeans, a heavy jacket, boots. I grabbed my truck keys and drove 43 minutes through the darkness, through the sleeping town, out past the last streetlights, onto the dirt road that leads to the canyon overlook. The road was rough, jarring, and with every bump I felt more awake, more alert, more aware that something significant was about to happen. When I reached the parking area, really just a widened spot where the road ends, I killed the engine and sat in the sudden silence. Through my windshield, I could see the faint outline of the canyon rim about 50 yards ahead, and beyond that, nothing but darkness and stars. So many stars. Out here, away from light pollution, the Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of light, and I remembered that the ancients called it the pathway to heaven. I stepped out of the truck, and the cold hit me immediately. Desert cold is different from other cold. It's dry, sharp. It seems to find every gap in your clothing. My breath came out in visible clouds. The wind was steady, not gusting, just a constant presence moving across the landscape, and it carried sounds with it. The distant cry of a coyote, the rustle of sagebrush, the almost imperceptible whisper of sand moving across stone. I walked toward the rim, my boots crunching on the mixture of sand and gravel, and as I got closer, the vast expanse of the canyon began to reveal itself. Even in darkness, you could sense the immensity of it, the way the ground simply dropped away, the way the wind seemed to rise up from the depths, the way the starlight caught the edges of distant rock formations and made them glow faintly, like the bones of some ancient sleeping giant. I stood at the edge, not too close, there's no railing out here, and I looked out across that vast emptiness, and I started to pray. "Jesus," I said aloud, my voice sounding small against the immensity of the landscape, "I'm here. I don't know why, but I'm here. Show me what you want me to see." For several minutes, nothing happened. Just me, the cold, the wind, the stars. I began to wonder if I'd misheard, if the dream had just been a dream, if I was standing out here in the middle of the night like a fool, talking to the darkness. And then the temperature dropped. I don't mean it got gradually colder. I mean the temperature plummeted in an instant, like someone had opened a door to winter. My breath caught in my throat. The wind stopped completely, and I mean completely, an absolute stillness that felt unnatural, impossible in this place where the wind never fully ceases. The silence was so profound I could hear my own heartbeat, the rush of blood in my ears. And then I saw him. He didn't appear gradually. He was simply there, standing about 10 feet to my right, at the very edge of the canyon rim, looking out across the expanse. He was wearing simple robes that moved slightly even though there was no wind, and his hair was dark, shoulder length, and his profile was illuminated by a light that didn't come from the stars or moon, but seemed to emanate from his very presence. I want you to understand something. I've played this role for years. I've studied the Gospels. I've imagined Jesus in 1,000 different ways. But nothing prepared me for the reality of his presence, the sheer weight of it, the holiness that radiated from him like heat from a fire, the sense that I was standing in the presence of someone who had spoken galaxies into existence, who held every atom in the universe together by the power of his word. I fell to my knees, not because I decided to, because my legs simply wouldn't hold me anymore. "Lord," I whispered, and I couldn't say anything else. My throat had closed up with emotion. He turned to look at me, and his eyes, I can't describe them adequately. They were filled with such love, such sorrow, such fierce determination. Tears were streaming down his face, catching the starlight, and when he spoke, his voice was both gentle and thunderous, intimate and cosmic. "Jonathan," he said, "do you know why I brought you here?" I shook my head, unable to speak. He gestured out across the canyon, and as he did, the darkness began to change. The vast expanse below us started to fill with light, not bright light, but a dim, flickering glow, like millions of candles spread across the canyon floor, extending as far as I could see in every direction. "These are my chosen ones," he said. "Every light you see is a person I have marked, called, set apart for my purposes. Do you see how many there are?" I looked out across the canyon, and there were so many lights I couldn't begin to count them. Millions, tens of millions. They filled the entire visible landscape, a sea of flickering flames in the darkness. "Yes, Lord," I managed to say. "Now watch," he said, and his voice broke with emotion. "Watch what's happening to them." As I watched, some of the lights began to dim, not all at once, but gradually, one by one, then in clusters, then in waves. Lights that had been burning steadily began to flicker, to fade, to shrink down to almost nothing. And as they dimmed, I could hear voices, thousands of voices, rising up from the canyon like a mournful chorus. "Why haven't you used me yet?" I thought I was called, but nothing's happening. Maybe I misheard you. Maybe I'm not actually chosen. I've been waiting so long. I must have gotten it wrong. Other people are being used, but not me. I must not be special enough. The voices crashed over me like waves, and I felt the despair in them, the confusion, the slow dying of hope. I watched as light after light dimmed, and some went out completely, leaving only darkness where they had been. Jesus turned to me, and the tears on his face were flowing freely now, and he said something that shook me to my core. "They're waiting for a sign that they've been chosen, Jonathan. They're waiting for some dramatic moment, some undeniable confirmation, some feeling or experience that will prove to them that I've marked them, but they already have the sign, I've already given it to them, and because they don't recognize it, because they're looking for something else, they're letting their light go out. They're walking away from their calling. They're convincing themselves they misheard me, that they're not special, that they're not chosen, when the truth is, I marked them before the foundation of the world." He stepped closer to me, and the intensity of his presence made me want to look away, but I couldn't. His eyes held mine. "Do you know what the sign is, Jonathan? Do you know what marks someone as chosen?" I shook my head, my heart pounding. He reached out and touched my chest, right over my heart, and where he touched, I felt warmth spread through my entire body, pushing back the cold, filling me with a sensation I can only describe as liquid light. The sign is the hunger, he said. The sign is the restlessness. The sign is the dissatisfaction with shallow faith and empty religion. The sign is the constant feeling that there must be more, that you were made for something greater, that you can't settle for a comfortable, conventional Christian life. The sign is the way you can't stop thinking about me, even when you're not trying to, the way you're drawn to prayer, even when it feels dry, the way you read my word and something in you responds, even when your mind doesn't fully understand, the way you watch injustice and feel my anger, the way you see suffering and feel my compassion, the way you encounter lost people and feel my love for them burning in your chest. He paused, and his voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but somehow I heard every word with perfect clarity. The sign that you've been chosen is that you're watching this right now. It's that something in you responded when you saw the title of this video. It's that you didn't scroll past. It's that even if you're skeptical, even if you're not sure what to think about all this, you're still here, still listening, because something in your spirit recognizes my voice. I was weeping now, understanding flooding through me. How many times had I felt that restlessness? How many times had I wondered if I was crazy for wanting more than what conventional Christianity offered? How many times had I felt like I was marked for something but couldn't figure out what it was? Jesus turned back to the canyon, to the sea of dimming lights, and his voice filled with urgency. They're dying, Jonathan. My chosen ones are dying spiritually because they don't recognize the sign I've already given them. They think being chosen means everything will be easy, that doors will fly open, that their calling will be obvious and their path will be clear. But that's not how it works. Being chosen means being refined. It means being tested. It means seasons of hiddenness and preparation. It means the wilderness before the promised land. It means the cave before the palace. It means the backside of the desert before the burning bush. He pointed to a cluster of lights that were burning brightly, steady and strong despite the darkness around them. Do you see those? Do you see the ones whose light isn't dimming? I nodded. Do you know what makes them different? They recognized the sign. They understood that the hunger itself is the evidence of their calling. They stopped waiting for some external confirmation and started responding to the internal mark I've placed on their hearts. They stopped comparing their journey to others' journeys. They stopped measuring their calling by visible results. They embraced the hiddenness. They trusted the process. They fed the hunger instead of trying to suppress it, and their light grew stronger, not weaker. He turned back to me, and his expression was fierce now, determined. This is why I brought you here, Jonathan. This is the message I need you to carry. My chosen ones are in danger of missing their calling, not because I haven't chosen them, but because they don't recognize the sign that they've been chosen. They're looking for the wrong thing. They're waiting for the wrong confirmation. And while they wait, while they doubt, while they convince themselves they must have misheard me, their light is going out. The wind suddenly returned, rushing up from the canyon with such force that I had to brace myself. The temperature began to rise slightly, and the lights in the canyon started to fade from view, the vision dissolving back into darkness. But Jesus remained, his presence still tangible, still overwhelming. Come back tomorrow night, he said. Same time, same place. There's more you need to see. There's more they need to understand. Lord, I said, finding my voice, what if they don't believe me? What if they think I'm making this up? He smiled then, sad but knowing. The ones who are truly marked will recognize the truth in your words. Something in their spirit will respond. They'll feel that hunger intensify. They'll sense my presence confirming what you're saying. The others, the ones who scroll past, who dismiss this, who mock or criticize, they were never the intended audience. This message isn't for everyone, Jonathan. It's only for the chosen ones, and they'll know. They'll know. He began to fade then, his form becoming translucent, merging with the starlight, until he was gone, and I was alone again on the canyon rim with the cold and the wind and the vast expanse of darkness below. I don't know how long I sat there, long enough for my body to start shaking from the cold, long enough for the stars to wheel perceptibly across the sky, long enough for the first faint hint of pre-dawn light to begin touching the eastern horizon. When I finally stood, my legs were stiff, my hands were numb, but my heart was on fire. I walked back to my truck in a daze, and as I drove home through the darkness, I kept seeing those lights, millions of them dimming, going out while Jesus wept. I'm recording this just hours after that encounter. I haven't slept. I can't sleep. The urgency of what he showed me is burning in my chest, demanding to be released. If you're still watching this, if you've made it this far, then you need to understand something. You are one of the marked ones. The very fact that you're here, that you're listening, that something in you is responding to these words, that's the sign, that's the evidence, that hunger you feel, that restlessness, that sense that you're meant for more. That's not a problem to be solved. That's not a deficiency to be fixed. That's the mark of your calling. Stop waiting for some dramatic confirmation. Stop comparing your journey to others. Stop measuring your calling by visible results. The sign is already there. You've already been chosen. The question is, will you recognize it? Will you respond to it? Or will you let your light dim while you wait for something that's already been given? Tomorrow night, I'm going back to that canyon. Jesus said there's more I need to see, more you need to understand, and I'm going to share every detail with you, no matter how strange it sounds, no matter who believes me or doesn't. But right now, I need you to do something. I need you to stop this video and spend 5 minutes in silence, just 5 minutes. No music, no distractions. And I need you to ask Jesus one question. Lord, have you marked me? Have you chosen me? And then listen. Don't try to manufacture an answer. Don't try to force a feeling. Just listen and pay attention to that hunger in your chest, that restlessness, that sense of longing for more. That's him. That's his voice. That's the sign. I'll see you tomorrow night with part 2. Don't miss it. Your calling might depend on it. It was January 28th, 2026 at 2:47 a.m., the exact same time as the night before, when I found myself driving back to that canyon rim, but this time the journey felt different. The darkness seemed thicker, more oppressive, and as I navigated the dirt road, my headlights cutting through the blackness, I felt a weight settling on my chest that hadn't been there during the first trip. It was anticipation mixed with dread, the sense that whatever Jesus was about to show me tonight would be harder to witness, harder to carry, harder to share. The temperature had dropped even further than the previous night. When I checked my truck's external thermometer as I parked, it read 29 degrees. My breath formed thick clouds in the air as I stepped out, and the cold seemed to penetrate through my heavy jacket, through my layers, straight to my bones. But I also felt something else. I felt watched, not in a threatening way, but in an expectant way, as if the canyon itself, the ancient rocks, the wind, the stars, as if all of creation was holding its breath, waiting to see what would unfold. I walked to the rim, to almost the exact spot where I'd stood the night before, and I could still feel the echo of his presence there, like a warmth that lingered in the stone beneath my feet. The vast expanse stretched out before me, invisible in the darkness, but somehow more present than ever. I could hear the wind moving through the canyon, creating strange harmonics as it passed over rock formations and through narrow passages, an eerie symphony that sounded almost like voices singing in a language I couldn't understand. The sky above was impossibly clear. The Milky Way blazed across the heavens with such intensity that it cast actual shadows on the ground around me. I could see the dark silhouettes of juniper trees clinging to the canyon rim, twisted and gnarled from years of wind and weather, their branches reaching out over the void like supplicating arms. I didn't have to wait as long this time. The moment I whispered, "I'm here, Lord," the temperature plummeted again, that same impossible drop, and the wind ceased its movement and the silence crashed down like a physical force. And he was there, standing in the same spot as before, but this time he wasn't looking out over the canyon. He was looking directly at me, and his expression was more intense, more urgent than it had been the previous night. "Jonathan," he said, and his voice carried a weight that made my knees weak. "Tonight, I need to show you why they're missing the sign. I need to show you what's stealing their light." He gestured toward the canyon, and once again the darkness began to fill with those millions of flickering lights, that vast sea of chosen ones spread across the landscape below. But this time, as I watched, I began to see something else. Dark shapes moving among the lights. Shadows that seemed to have substance, that moved with purpose and intelligence, weaving between the flames. "What are those?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Watch," Jesus said. As I focused on the dark shapes, they began to take form. They weren't demons or monsters, they were something more insidious, more familiar. They were images, projections, illusions that hovered around each light, around each chosen person, and as I watched, I began to see what they were showing. Around one light, the shadows projected images of other people's success, social media posts, ministry platforms, book deals, speaking engagements, thousands of followers, viral videos. And I could hear a voice whispering, "See, they're being used, they're making an impact, but you're still waiting, you're still hidden. Maybe you're not really chosen after all. Around another light, the shadows showed a perfect timeline, a clear path from calling to fulfillment with specific dates and milestones and obvious confirmations. And the voice whispered, "This is what it should look like if God really called you. This is what being chosen means. But your path is messy, unclear, full of delays and detours. Maybe you misheard him." Around another, the shadows projected images of that person's past, failures, mistakes, sins, moments of weakness. And the voice hissed, "You think God would choose someone like you? With your history, with your struggles? Chosen people don't deal with what you're dealing with. Chosen people have it together." Light after light, I watched the same pattern, the shadows showing comparisons, timelines, expectations, accusations, and with each whisper, each projection, the lights would dim a little more. The chosen ones were being convinced that the very evidence of their calling, the hunger, the restlessness, the journey through hiddenness, was actually evidence that they weren't called at all. Jesus' voice broke through my observation, thick with emotion. "Do you see it, Jonathan? Do you see the lie? The enemy isn't trying to convince them that being chosen doesn't matter. He's trying to convince them that they're not chosen at all. He's taking the very signs I've given them, the hunger, the wilderness season, the hiddenness, the refining process, and twisting them into evidence of disqualification." He moved closer to the edge, and as he did, the scene below shifted. I could now see inside the experience of individual lights as if I was watching their internal dialogue, feeling their emotions. I saw a woman, mid-30s, sitting in her car in a church parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel, tears streaming down her face. She had just watched another person her age get called up to the platform, commissioned for ministry, celebrated and prayed over, and she was thinking, "I've been faithful. I've been serving in the shadows for years. I've been praying, seeking, preparing. Why not me? Why am I still waiting? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe that calling I felt was just my own ambition. Maybe I'm not actually chosen." Her light flickered, dimmed, nearly went out. Jesus' hand reached toward her, even though she was just a vision in the canyon below, and he whispered, "Daughter, you are chosen. This hiddenness is not rejection, it's preparation. I'm not withholding your calling, I'm deepening it. The hunger you feel is the sign. The waiting is the refining. Don't let the enemy convince you that my process means my absence." But she couldn't hear him. She started her car and drove home, and by the time she arrived, she had convinced herself to stop hoping, to stop believing she was meant for anything beyond ordinary existence. I watched her light go out completely. "No," I shouted, the word torn from my chest. "Lord, why didn't she hear you? Why couldn't she sense your presence?" Jesus turned to me, and the sorrow in his eyes was devastating. "Because she stopped recognizing the sign, Jonathan. She let the comparison steal her vision. She measured her calling by someone else's timeline. She looked at external confirmation instead of internal marking. The hunger was still there, I never removed it, but she interpreted it as evidence of failure instead of evidence of calling." He swept his arm across the canyon, and I saw hundreds, thousands of similar scenes playing out. A young man who had felt called to ministry, but after 2 years of closed doors and financial struggle, he was sitting in a corporate job interview, telling himself that he needed to be realistic, that he needed to grow up, that the calling he'd felt was probably just youthful idealism. His light dimmed to almost nothing. An older woman who had survived abuse, addiction, and poverty, who had encountered Jesus in a radical way and felt called to help others find freedom, but after a year of trying to start a ministry with no support, no resources, and no visible results, she was boxing up her materials and telling herself she'd been presumptuous to think God could use someone with her past. Her light flickered dangerously. A middle-aged man who had left a successful career because he felt God calling him to something different, but after 18 months of uncertainty, financial pressure, and his family questioning his decision, he was updating his resume and preparing to go back to his old life, convinced he'd made a mistake. His light was barely visible. Scene after scene, light after light, I watched the chosen ones convince themselves they weren't chosen, and the pattern was always the same. They had the sign, the hunger, the calling, the mark on their hearts, but they were looking for different evidence. They were waiting for external confirmation while ignoring the internal reality. They were measuring their journey by someone else's map. "Lord," I said, my voice breaking, "how do we stop this? How do we help them see?" Jesus looked at me with such intensity that I felt it like a physical force. You tell them the truth about the sign. You tell them that being chosen doesn't mean an easy path, it means a refining path. You tell them that the wilderness isn't evidence of God's absence, it's evidence of God's preparation. You tell them that hiddenness isn't punishment, it's protection. You tell them that the hunger itself, that constant aching sense that there must be more, that is the sign, that is the mark, that is the evidence of their calling. He turned back to the canyon, and the scene shifted again. This time I saw the lights that were burning brightly, the ones that hadn't dimmed, and as I watched, I began to see what made them different. These chosen ones were in similar circumstances, facing closed doors, experiencing delays, walking through wilderness seasons, dealing with financial pressure, enduring criticism from family and friends. But their response was different. I saw a young woman working a minimum wage job, living in a tiny apartment, spending her evenings in prayer and study, and when the thoughts came, "You should be further along by now, you must not be really called," she would speak out loud. "No, the hunger is the sign. The calling is the evidence. God is preparing me, not rejecting me. I will not let comparison steal my light." Her flame burned brighter. I saw a man in his 50s who had lost everything pursuing what he believed was God's call, his business, his savings, his reputation, and he was working construction to pay his bills while continuing to pursue the vision God had given him. And when the doubts came, "You're too old, you've failed, you should give up," he would open his Bible and read about Abraham, about Moses, about David, about all the ones who were refined in hiddenness before being revealed in purpose. His flame burned steady and strong. I saw a woman who had been serving faithfully in the shadows for 15 years, watching others get promoted, celebrated, recognized, while she remained unknown. And instead of letting bitterness dim her light, she had learned to find her identity in being chosen by God rather than celebrated by people. She had learned that the audience of one was enough. Her flame blazed like a torch. "Do you see the difference?" Jesus asked. "Do you see what separates those whose light grows from those whose light dies?" "They recognize the sign," I said, understanding flooding through me. "They interpret their circumstances through the lens of their calling, instead of interpreting their calling through the lens of their circumstances." "Yes!" Jesus' voice rang out across the canyon, and for a moment the stars seemed to pulse brighter in response. "Yes, Jonathan, that's exactly it. The chosen ones who fulfill their calling are the ones who recognize that the sign has already been given. They don't wait for external confirmation to validate what I've already placed inside them. They feed the hunger instead of questioning it. They embrace the wilderness instead of resenting it. They trust the process instead of demanding the outcome." He moved closer to me, and I could feel the heat of his presence pushing back the cold. "But here's what I need you to understand, what I need them to understand. Time is running out. The enemy knows who the chosen ones are. He can see the mark on them just as clearly as I can. And his strategy is simple: convince them they're not chosen before they step into their calling. Dim their light during the preparation season so they never make it to the purpose season. Steal their confidence in the hiddenness so they abort the mission before it even begins. The urgency in his voice intensified. "There's a window, Jonathan. A specific window of time when the chosen ones must recognize the sign and respond to it. If they miss that window, if they let their light go out during the preparation season, they don't just miss their calling, they miss the moment. They miss the Kairos time when heaven and earth align for their specific purpose." He pointed to a cluster of lights that were flickering on the verge of going out. "These are the ones I need you to reach. These are the ones who are right now, in this moment, deciding whether to keep believing or give up. They're tired. They're discouraged. They're confused. They've been faithful, but they're not seeing results. They've been hungry, but they're not being fed. They've been waiting, but nothing seems to be happening. And the enemy is whispering, 'See, you're not chosen. You misheard. You need to move on.'" Jesus' voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but somehow it filled the entire canyon. "But the truth is, they're closer than they've ever been. The breakthrough is coming. The door is about to open. The purpose is about to be revealed. But they have to hold on. They have to keep their light burning. They have to recognize that the very difficulty of this season is evidence of the significance of their calling." I felt tears streaming down my face, freezing in the cold air. How do I help them hold on, Lord? What do I tell them? Tell them this, he said, and his eyes locked onto mine with such fierce love that I felt it in my bones. Tell them that if they're feeling the hunger right now, if they're watching this and something in their chest is burning, aching, responding, that's me, that's the sign, that's the mark. I'm confirming their calling in this very moment. The fact that they're still seeking, still searching, still hungry after all the disappointment and delay, that's not weakness, that's supernatural strength. That's evidence that I'm holding them, keeping them, preparing them for something so significant that it requires this level of refining. The wind suddenly returned, rushing up from the canyon with such force that I staggered backward. The temperature began to rise slightly, and the vision of the lights started to fade. But before it disappeared completely, Jesus spoke one more time. Tomorrow night, Jonathan, same time, same place. I'm going to show you what happens to those who recognize the sign and respond to it. I'm going to show you what I'm preparing them for, and I'm going to show you what's at stake if they don't. He began to fade, his form becoming translucent against the starlight, but his final words hung in the air like a physical presence. The chosen ones are marked. The sign has been given. The only question is, will they recognize it before it's too late? And then he was gone, and I was alone on the canyon rim with the cold and the wind and the weight of what I'd witnessed pressing down on my chest like a stone. I stood there for a long time, watching the sky begin to lighten in the east, the stars fading one by one as dawn approached. The canyon below me was becoming visible now, the red rock walls emerging from darkness, the vast expanse revealing its true scale in the growing light. And I thought about all those lights I'd seen, all those chosen ones who were right now deciding whether to keep believing or give up. I thought about you, watching this. I thought about the hunger you feel, the restlessness, the sense that you're meant for more. I thought about how many times you've questioned whether you really heard God's voice, whether you're really called, whether you're really chosen. And I need you to hear this. The fact that you're still here, still watching, still hungry, that's the sign. That's the evidence. That's the mark. The enemy wants you to interpret your wilderness as evidence of disqualification, but Jesus is saying it's evidence of preparation. The enemy wants you to see the hiddenness as rejection, but Jesus is saying it's protection. The enemy wants you to measure your calling by other people's timelines, but Jesus is saying your journey is unique, your process is specific, your preparation is custom designed for your particular purpose. Stop waiting for some dramatic external confirmation. Stop comparing your chapter 3 to someone else's chapter 20. Stop letting the difficulty of the journey convince you that you're on the wrong path. The sign is the hunger. The sign is the restlessness. The sign is the fact that you can't settle for shallow faith and comfortable Christianity. The sign is that you're watching this right now, and something in your spirit is responding, confirming, burning. I need you to do something before tomorrow night's video. I need you to make a decision, not a feeling, a decision. I need you to decide that you're going to stop questioning whether you're chosen and start responding to the fact that you are. I need you to decide that you're going to interpret your circumstances through the lens of your calling instead of interpreting your calling through the lens of your circumstances. Write this down somewhere, you'll see it every day. The hunger is the sign. I am chosen. I am marked. I am being prepared for purpose. And every time the doubts come, and they will come, every time the enemy whispers that you're not really called, that you misheard, that you're not special enough, I need you to speak that truth out loud, declare it, claim it, stand on it. Because tomorrow night, Jesus is going to show me what he's preparing you for. He's going to reveal what's at stake, and you need to be ready to receive it with a heart that's already settled on the truth. You are chosen, you are marked, and the sign has already been given. Comment below right now, just type, I recognize the sign, because I need to know who's really hearing this. I need to know who's making the decision to stop questioning and start responding. Tomorrow night, same time. Part 3. Don't miss it. Your destiny might depend on it. The sun is rising now as I record this. The canyon is fully visible, the red rocks glowing in the early morning light, and it's beautiful beyond words. But it's nothing compared to what Jesus showed me in the darkness. Nothing compared to the reality of those millions of chosen ones, marked and called and prepared for purposes that will shake the earth. You're one of them. Stop doubting it. Start living it. I'll see you tomorrow night. It was January 29th, 2026, at 2:47 a.m. when I made the drive to the canyon rim for the third consecutive night, and this time everything felt different. The air itself seemed charged with electricity, with anticipation, with the sense that something climactic was about to unfold. As I drove through the darkness, I noticed things I hadn't seen the previous 2 nights. The way the stars seemed brighter, almost pulsing with light. The way the wind had picked up, not just blowing, but swirling, creating vortexes of dust that danced in my headlights. The way the temperature, instead of being uniformly cold, seemed to fluctuate wildly, one moment frigid, the next almost warm, as if the atmosphere itself couldn't decide what it was supposed to be. When I reached the parking area and killed my engine, I sat for a moment in the silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my heart hammering in my chest. I was afraid, not of Jesus, never of Jesus, but of what he was about to show me. The previous 2 nights had already shaken me to my core, had already given me more than I felt capable of carrying. What could possibly be left to reveal? I stepped out of the truck, and immediately I knew this night was different. The wind hit me with such force that I had to brace myself against the vehicle. It wasn't just wind, it was wind with purpose, wind with direction, wind that seemed to be pushing me toward the canyon rim. The temperature was dropping rapidly, my breath coming out in thick clouds, but there was also warmth in the wind, pockets of heat that made no meteorological sense. The sky above was a spectacle I'd never witnessed before. The stars weren't just visible, they were blazing, and between them, curtains of light were beginning to form. Not the northern lights, we were too far south for that, but something similar, sheets of pale green and blue that rippled across the heavens like cosmic fabric being shaken out by invisible hands. I walked toward the rim, and with each step the wind intensified. My jacket whipped around me, my hair was blown back from my face, and I could hear that strange harmonic sound rising from the canyon again, but louder now, more insistent, almost like a choir warming up before a performance. When I reached the edge, I looked out across the vast expanse, and even before Jesus appeared, I could see that the canyon was different tonight. The rock formations seemed to glow with an inner light, a deep red luminescence that pulsed like a heartbeat. The air above the canyon was thick with movement, not birds, not insects, but something else, shapes that flickered in and out of visibility, presences that I could sense more than see. I didn't have to call out to him this time. The moment I arrived at the rim, he was there, but not standing beside me as he had been the previous nights. He was standing in the air, suspended above the canyon, his robes billowing in the wind, his arms outstretched, his face turned upward toward the heavens, and the light that emanated from him was so intense that I had to shield my eyes, so bright that it cast stark shadows on the canyon walls, illuminating formations that had been hidden in darkness. "Jonathan!" His voice boomed across the landscape, not angry but powerful, authoritative, the voice of someone who commanded galaxies and held oceans in the palm of his hand. "Tonight you will see what I'm preparing my chosen ones for. Tonight you will understand what's at stake. Tonight you will witness the reason for the refining, the purpose behind the wilderness, the destiny that awaits those who recognize the sign and refuse to let their light go out." As he spoke, the canyon below erupted with light, not the flickering candles of the previous nights, but blazing torches, pillars of fire, beacons that shot up from the canyon floor like reverse lightning, connecting earth to heaven. Millions of them, tens of millions, more than I could count, filling the entire visible landscape and extending beyond the horizon in every direction. "These are the ones who recognize the sign," Jesus shouted above the wind. "These are the ones who refuse to let comparison steal their calling. These are the ones who embraced the wilderness, who trusted the hiddenness, who fed the hunger instead of questioning it. These are my army, my chosen ones, my marked and prepared vessels. Watch what I'm about to do through them." The scene shifted, and suddenly I wasn't just observing from above, I was somehow in the vision, experiencing it from within. I could see individual chosen ones, and I could see what Jesus was releasing through them. I saw a woman, the same woman I'd seen 2 nights ago, the one sitting in the church parking lot, crying, questioning her calling. But this version of her had made a different choice. She had recognized the sign. She had refused to let her light go out. And now I watched as she stood before thousands of women who had survived abuse, trafficking, addiction, and she spoke with such authority, such power, such anointing that chains literally broke off the women as she spoke. I could see it happening in the spiritual realm, shackles shattering, prison doors flying open, darkness fleeing before the light that blazed from her. And Jesus leaned close to me and said, "This is why she had to go through her own wilderness. This is why she had to be refined in hiddenness. The authority she's walking in now could only be forged in the fire of her own deliverance, and the patience of her own waiting. The scene shifted, and I saw the young man who had been sitting in that corporate job interview, about to give up on his calling. But in this version, he had held on. He had recognized the sign, and now I watched as he stood in inner cities, in the hardest, darkest places, and when he spoke the name of Jesus, gang members fell to their knees weeping. Drug dealers threw their product into the street and lifted their hands in surrender. Prostitutes ran from their corners toward him, crying out for salvation, and the light that came from him was so intense that it literally pushed back the darkness. I could see demonic forces fleeing before him like shadows before the dawn. Jesus' voice was thick with emotion. Do you see, Jonathan? Do you see why the enemy fought so hard to convince him he wasn't chosen? Do you see why the delays, the closed doors, the financial pressure? The enemy knew what I was preparing him for. He knew the territory this young man would take back. He knew the souls that would be saved. So he tried to get him to quit during the preparation season, before he ever stepped into the purpose season. Scene after scene unfolded before me, each one more powerful than the last. I saw the older woman who had boxed up her ministry materials ready to quit, but in this version, she had recognized the sign and persevered. And now she was leading a movement that was emptying prisons, transforming addicts, restoring families. The anointing on her was so strong that when she walked into a room, people could feel the presence of God like a physical weight. Hardened criminals broke down and confessed their sins. Addicts were instantly delivered, broken families were supernaturally healed. And Jesus said, her past wasn't a disqualification, it was her credential. Her struggles weren't evidence that she wasn't chosen. They were evidence of what she was being prepared to destroy in others' lives. I saw the middle-aged man who had almost gone back to his corporate career, but in this version, he had held on to his calling. And now he was leading a reformation in the marketplace, teaching believers how to carry the presence of God into business, into finance, into technology. Companies were being transformed. Corrupt systems were being exposed and dismantled. Wealth was being redirected from the kingdom of darkness into the kingdom of light. And the wisdom that flowed through him was so profound that even secular leaders sought his counsel. Vision after vision, I watched the chosen ones who had recognized the sign step into their purpose, and the impact was staggering. They weren't just doing ministry, they were shifting atmospheres, transforming cities, influencing nations. They were walking in authority that made demons tremble and angels rejoice. They were operating in power that defied natural explanation. And then Jesus turned to me, and his expression was fierce, urgent, almost desperate. This is what's at stake, Jonathan. This is what the enemy is trying to prevent. Every chosen one who lets their light go out during the preparation season is a territory that won't be taken, a soul that won't be saved, a chain that won't be broken, a system that won't be transformed. The enemy doesn't fight against people who aren't a threat. He doesn't waste his ammunition on those who won't make an impact. The very intensity of the warfare, the very difficulty of the wilderness, the very length of the waiting, these are evidence of the significance of the calling. He swept his arm across the canyon, and the scene shifted again. This time, instead of seeing the chosen ones who had recognized the sign, I saw the ones who hadn't, the ones who had let their lights go out, the ones who had convinced themselves they weren't really called. And I watched the territories they were supposed to take remain in darkness. I watched the souls they were supposed to reach die without salvation. I watched the chains they were supposed to break remain locked. I watched the systems they were supposed to transform continue in corruption. But worse than that, I watched what happened to them personally. I saw the woman who had given up on her calling, and she was sitting in a comfortable church service singing worship songs, going through the motions, but her eyes were dead. There was no fire, no passion, no hunger. She had settled for safety, for comfort, for a conventional Christian life, and while she wasn't in overt sin, wasn't doing anything wrong, she was dying inside. The hunger that had once burned in her chest had been suppressed so long that it had turned into a dull ache, a constant sense of, is this all there is? That she tried to medicate with shopping, with social media, with busyness, with anything that would distract her from the calling she'd abandoned. I saw the young man who had taken the corporate job, and he was successful by worldly standards. Good salary, nice house, respected position, but he would wake up at 3 a.m. with panic attacks, with the overwhelming sense that he was in the wrong place, living the wrong life. He would look at his children and feel a desperate fear that he was modeling a life of compromise, teaching them to play it safe, to ignore God's voice, to choose security over calling. And the worst part was, he could still feel the mark on his heart, could still sense the calling he'd walked away from, and it haunted him like a ghost. I saw the older woman who had boxed up her ministry materials, and she had gone back to a normal life, but she was consumed with bitterness. She watched other people step into ministry, and instead of rejoicing, she felt resentment. She would think, that should have been me. I was called first, I was prepared, but it didn't work out. And the bitterness poisoned everything, her relationships, her worship, her prayer life. She had become a cautionary tale, someone who warned younger believers not to be too radical, not to hear from God too much, not to step out in faith because it doesn't always work out. Jesus' voice broke through my observation, and it was filled with such grief that I felt it like a knife in my chest. This is the tragedy, Jonathan. Not that they lose their salvation, I never let go of them, but that they lose their purpose. They spend the rest of their lives with a nagging sense of, what if? They settle for survival when they were designed for significance. They choose comfort when they were called to conquest. And the worst part is, they convince themselves they made the wise choice, the mature choice, the responsible choice, when in reality, they simply stopped believing that the sign was real. He moved closer to me, and I could see tears streaming down his face, evaporating in the wind before they could fall. Do you know what breaks my heart most? It's not that they failed. I can work with failure. It's not that they sinned. I can forgive sin. It's that they stopped believing they were chosen. They looked at the sign I gave them, the hunger, the calling, the mark on their hearts, and they decided it wasn't enough. They wanted something more dramatic, more obvious, more externally validated, and while they waited for that, while they demanded different evidence, the window closed. The Kairos moment passed, and they spent the rest of their lives wondering what could have been. The wind suddenly intensified to near hurricane force, and I had to drop to my knees to keep from being blown backward. The lights in the canyon, both the blazing torches of those who had recognized the sign and the absent spaces where lights had gone out, began to pulse in rhythm, like a massive heartbeat. The strange harmonic sound from the canyon swelled into what I can only describe as a cosmic symphony, beautiful and terrible at the same time. Jesus raised his hands toward heaven, and his voice rang out with such authority that I felt it vibrate in my bones. Hear me, chosen ones. Hear me, marked ones. Hear me, you who are watching this and feeling the hunger burn in your chest. The sign has been given. The mark is upon you. The calling is real. Stop waiting for external confirmation of what I've already placed inside you. Stop measuring your journey by someone else's timeline. Stop interpreting your wilderness as evidence of disqualification when it's actually evidence of preparation. He turned to face me directly, and his eyes blazed with intensity. Tell them, Jonathan. Tell them that the difficulty of their journey is proportional to the significance of their calling. Tell them that the length of their wilderness is connected to the depth of their authority. Tell them that the intensity of the warfare is evidence of the territory they're going to take. Tell them that the enemy doesn't waste ammunition on people who won't make an impact. The scene in the canyon began to shift rapidly now, showing me flashes of what was coming. I saw a great shaking coming to the church, a separation between those who were truly chosen and those who were merely religious. I saw the comfortable, the complacent, the conventional being exposed and removed, while the hungry, the desperate, the marked ones were being elevated into positions of authority. I saw a massive harvest of souls coming, but it wouldn't be reached by traditional methods or conventional ministry. It would require the chosen ones who had been refined in the wilderness, who had been trained in hiddenness, who had learned to operate in authority that came from intimacy rather than position. I saw systems of corruption and injustice being dismantled, but not by political movements or social activism alone. It would require chosen ones who had been given supernatural wisdom and strategy, who could see in the spirit realm and execute in the natural realm. I saw a generation of young people who were currently lost, broken, addicted, suicidal, and I saw the chosen ones who were being prepared right now to reach them. But these chosen ones had to go through their own wilderness first, had to be refined in their own fire, had to learn their own authority so they could lead others through the same process. And then Jesus showed me something that made my blood run cold. I saw a deadline. Not a date I can share publicly, but a window of time, a specific season when the chosen ones must recognize the sign and respond to it, or the opportunity will pass. Not forever, but for this particular moment, this specific assignment, this Kairos season. And I saw what would happen if too many chosen ones missed the window. Territories would remain in darkness, souls would be lost, the harvest would be delayed, and the chosen ones themselves would enter a season of regret that would take years to overcome. The time is now, Jesus said, and his voice carried such urgency that it felt like a physical force pushing against my chest. Not tomorrow, not next year, not when they feel more ready, more qualified, more confirmed. Now. The chosen ones must recognize the sign now and begin responding to it now, even if they don't fully understand it, even if the path isn't clear, even if it requires them to step out in faith before they see the outcome. He pointed to the blazing lights in the canyon, the ones who had recognized the sign. Do you know what they all had in common? They didn't wait until they felt ready. They didn't wait until the path was clear. They didn't wait until they had all the resources or all the answers. They simply recognized the sign, the hunger, the calling, the mark, and they started responding to it. They took the next step, even when they couldn't see the whole staircase. They said yes to the wilderness, yes to the hiddenness, yes to the refining, because they trusted that I knew what I was doing. The vision began to fade, the lights in the canyon dimming, the wind starting to decrease. But before it disappeared completely, Jesus spoke one final time, and his words were seared into my consciousness like a brand. Tell them this, Jonathan, the sign that you've been chosen is not a feeling that comes and goes. It's not an external confirmation that may or may not arrive. It's not a comparison to someone else's journey. The sign is the hunger that won't go away. The sign is the restlessness that won't be satisfied with shallow faith. The sign is the calling that keeps echoing in your heart no matter how many times you try to silence it. The sign is the fact that you're watching this right now, and something in your spirit is responding, confirming, burning with recognition. He began to fade, his form becoming translucent against the now calming sky. And tell them this, I'm not looking for perfect people. I'm not looking for people who have it all together. I'm not looking for people who've never failed or struggled or doubted. I'm looking for people who recognize the sign and refuse to let their light go out. I'm looking for people who will embrace the wilderness instead of resenting it. I'm looking for people who will trust the process instead of demanding the outcome. I'm looking for people who will say yes to the calling even when it costs them everything. His final words hung in the air as he disappeared. Tomorrow night, Jonathan, one more time, I'm going to give you the practical steps. I'm going to show you exactly what the chosen ones need to do to respond to the sign. Don't miss it. And tell them not to miss it. Their destiny depends on it. And then he was gone, and I was alone on the canyon rim as the sun began to rise, painting the red rocks in shades of gold and crimson. The wind had died down to a gentle breeze, the temperature was rising, and the strange lights in the sky had faded. But the weight of what I'd witnessed, the urgency of the message, the reality of what was at stake, that remained, pressing down on my chest like a physical burden. I stood there for a long time watching the canyon emerge fully into daylight, and I thought about you. I thought about the fact that you're still here, still watching, still hungry. I thought about the calling on your life, the mark on your heart, the destiny that's waiting for you if you'll just recognize the sign and respond to it. And I need you to understand something. This isn't a game. This isn't religious entertainment. This isn't motivational speaking. What Jesus showed me over these 3 nights is real, urgent, and time-sensitive. There are territories waiting to be taken, souls waiting to be saved, chains waiting to be broken, systems waiting to be transformed, and you are the one who's been chosen, marked, and prepared to do it. But you have to recognize the sign. You have to stop waiting for external confirmation. You have to stop comparing your journey to others. You have to stop letting the difficulty of the wilderness convince you that you're not called. The sign is the hunger. The sign is the restlessness. The sign is the calling that won't go away. The sign is that you're watching this right now, and something in your spirit is burning with recognition. I need you to do something right now, before tomorrow night's final video. I need you to make a declaration, out loud, not just in your head, out loud. Say this. I recognize the sign. I am chosen. I am marked. I refuse to let my light go out. I embrace the wilderness. I trust the process. I say yes to the calling even when I don't understand it, even when it's difficult, even when it costs me everything. I will not compare my journey to others. I will not wait for external confirmation. I will respond to the internal mark that God has placed on my heart. I am chosen, and I will walk in my calling. Say it out loud, right now, and then comment below. I made the declaration. Because tomorrow night, in the final part, Jesus is going to give us the practical steps. He's going to show us exactly what to do to respond to the sign. And you need to be ready to receive it with a heart that's already settled, already committed, already determined to walk in your calling no matter what it costs. The sun is fully up now as I record this. The canyon is beautiful in the daylight, vast, majestic, ancient. But it's nothing compared to what I saw in the darkness, nothing compared to the reality of those millions of chosen ones, marked and called and prepared for purposes that will shake nations. You're one of them. Stop doubting it. Start living it. Tomorrow night. Final part. The practical steps. Don't miss it. Your destiny is waiting. It's been 3 days since that final encounter on the canyon rim, January 30th, 2026, at 2:47 a.m., and I'm still processing what Jesus showed me that fourth night. I'm still carrying the weight of it, still feeling the urgency burning in my chest like a coal that won't cool down. But before I tell you about that final encounter, before I give you the practical steps that Jesus laid out with such precision and clarity, I need to tell you what happened when I went back to the canyon yesterday afternoon, in broad daylight, alone with my thoughts and my memories. I drove out there around 3 p.m. when the sun was still high and the temperature was a comfortable 68 degrees, such a stark contrast to the freezing pre-dawn hours of those 4 consecutive nights. I parked in the same spot, walked the same path to the rim, stood in the same place where I'd encountered Jesus, and in the daylight, with tourists walking nearby, with the sounds of car doors closing and children laughing in the distance, the canyon looked so normal, beautiful, yes, majestic, absolutely, but normal. And for a moment, just a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined it all, if the sleep deprivation and the cold and the darkness had somehow conspired to create an experience that felt real but wasn't. If I'd let my imagination run wild, let my desire to hear from God create an encounter that was more psychological than spiritual. But then I looked out across that vast expanse and I remembered the lights, millions of them, flickering, dimming, blazing. I remembered Jesus standing in the air above the canyon, arms outstretched, tears streaming down his face. I remembered the urgency in his voice, the grief, the fierce determination, and I knew with every fiber of my being that what I'd experienced was real. More than that, I felt it confirmed in my spirit, that same hunger that Jesus had identified as the sign, that same restlessness, that same burning sense of calling. It was stronger now than it had ever been. The encounters hadn't satisfied it, they'd intensified it, and I realized that's exactly what Jesus had been trying to tell me. The sign isn't something that comes and goes, it's something that grows, that deepens, that becomes more insistent the closer you get to your purpose. So let me tell you about that fourth night, that final encounter, because what Jesus showed me, what he told me to tell you, it's the most practical, most actionable, most urgent message of all. When I arrived at the canyon rim on January 30th at 2:47 a.m., the atmosphere was different again. Not charged with electricity like the third night, not heavy with anticipation like the second, but settled, peaceful, like the calm after a storm, when the air is clear and everything feels washed clean and new. The temperature was cold, but not unbearable, around 35 degrees. The wind was gentle, steady, carrying the scent of sage and juniper. The stars were brilliant but not overwhelming, and there were no strange lights in the sky, no unusual phenomena, just a beautiful desert night, quiet and still. I walked to the rim, and Jesus was already there, sitting on a large flat rock near the edge, looking out across the canyon. He wasn't glowing with supernatural light. He wasn't suspended in the air. He looked almost ordinary, human, approachable, like a friend waiting for you to join him for a conversation. "Sit with me, Jonathan," he said, patting the rock beside him. I sat, and for several minutes, we just looked out across the darkness together in silence. It was comfortable, intimate, the kind of silence you can only share with someone you trust completely. Finally, he spoke. "You've seen what's at stake. You've seen the chosen ones who are letting their lights go out, and you've seen the ones who are stepping into their purpose. You've seen the territories that need to be taken, the souls that need to be saved, the systems that need to be transformed. Now I need to give you the practical steps. I need to show you exactly what the chosen ones need to do to respond to the sign." He turned to look at me, and his expression was gentle but serious. "This isn't complicated, Jonathan. The enemy wants them to think it's complicated, mysterious, impossible to figure out. But the truth is, responding to the calling is simple, not easy, but simple. And the chosen ones who will fulfill their purpose are the ones who will commit to these simple steps and do them consistently, even when they don't feel like it, even when they don't see immediate results, even when the wilderness season continues." He held up his hand, and as he spoke, he counted off on his fingers. First, they must establish a daily encounter time, not a religious routine, not a checkbox to mark off, but a genuine, intentional, protected time every single day when they come into my presence with the specific purpose of feeding the hunger. 30 minutes minimum. No phone, no distractions, no agenda except to be with me. This is non-negotiable. The chosen ones who let their lights go out are always the ones who let this slip. They get busy, they get distracted, they convince themselves they can maintain the calling without maintaining the intimacy. But it doesn't work that way. The calling flows from the intimacy. The authority comes from the encounter. The anointing is sustained by the presence. He paused, making sure I was getting every word. Tell them this, the 30 minutes isn't about what they do during that time. It's not about how many Bible chapters they read or how eloquent their prayers are. It's about showing up. It's about saying, God, I recognize the sign. I know I'm chosen, and I'm prioritizing this relationship above everything else. Some days they'll feel His presence powerfully. Other days they'll feel nothing. It doesn't matter. What matters is the consistency, the commitment, the declaration that this relationship is the foundation of everything else. Second, he continued, holding up another finger, they must identify their next step and take it within 72 hours. Not the whole staircase, just the next step. The chosen ones who get paralyzed are the ones who try to figure out the entire journey before they start walking. But that's not how I work. I give light for the next step, not the whole path. So they need to ask me, what's the next step? What's the one thing you're asking me to do right now? And when they hear it, and they will hear it if they're spending that daily time with me, they need to take action within 72 hours. He leaned forward, his voice intensifying. This is crucial, Jonathan. The enemy's strategy is delay. He knows he can't stop the calling, so he tries to delay the response. He whispers, wait until you have more clarity. Wait until you have more resources. Wait until you feel more ready. But waiting without a specific instruction from me is just another form of disobedience. The next step might be small. Make a phone call, send an email, have a conversation, start a project, end a relationship, begin a discipline. It doesn't matter how small it seems. What matters is the obedience, because obedience to the next step releases revelation for the step after that. Third, he said, and his expression became more serious, they must identify and eliminate the light dimmers. These are the things, people, habits, or thought patterns that are actively dimming their light. Not everything that's dimming their light is obviously sinful. Sometimes it's good things that have become God things. Sometimes it's relationships that used to be life-giving but have become draining. Sometimes it's habits that used to be helpful but have become hindrances. Sometimes it's thought patterns, comparison, self-doubt, fear that have become so familiar they don't even recognize them anymore. He looked at me intently. Tell them to ask me specifically, Lord, what's dimming my light right now? And then tell them to be brave enough to hear the answer and act on it. This might mean ending a friendship that's pulling them away from their calling. It might mean quitting a job that's consuming all their energy and leaving nothing for their purpose. It might mean deleting social media apps that are feeding the comparison trap. It might mean confronting a sin they've been tolerating. Whatever it is, they need to eliminate it ruthlessly. The chosen ones who fulfill their calling are the ones who are willing to cut off anything that's hindering their purpose, no matter how painful it is. Fourth, he continued, they must find their tribe. The chosen ones cannot walk this journey alone. They need to find other marked ones, other hungry ones, other people who recognize the sign and are committed to responding to it. Not just any Christian community, they need a tribe of people who understand the wilderness, who celebrate the hiddenness, who don't judge the process, people who will speak truth when they're doubting, who will remind them of their calling when they're discouraged, who will celebrate their obedience even when there are no visible results yet. His voice softened. I never designed my chosen ones to walk alone. The enemy isolates them, convinces them that no one else understands, that they're the only ones going through this. But that's a lie. There are millions of marked ones, and they need to find each other. Tell them to ask me, where is my tribe? And then tell them to be intentional about pursuing those connections, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it requires vulnerability, even if it means risking rejection. Fifth, he said, and now his voice carried a warning edge, they must establish a deadline, not for when I'm going to fulfill the calling, they don't get to dictate that, but a deadline for their own commitment to the process. They need to say, For the next 90 days, I'm going to do these things consistently, regardless of what I see or don't see, regardless of how I feel or don't feel, regardless of whether doors open or stay closed. I'm going to show up for the daily encounter. I'm going to take the next steps as you reveal them. I'm going to eliminate the light dimmers. I'm going to pursue my tribe, and I'm going to trust that you're working even when I can't see it. He stood up from the rock, and I stood with him. The deadline is important because it creates accountability. It prevents them from quitting when things get hard. It gives them a specific time frame to evaluate. Am I really doing what God asked me to do? Am I really responding to the sign? Or am I just talking about it? And here's what I promise them. If they will commit to these 5 things for 90 days, genuinely commit, not half-heartedly, not when it's convenient, they will see breakthrough. Maybe not the complete fulfillment of their calling, but breakthrough. A door will open, a connection will be made, a revelation will come, something will shift, because I honor obedience, and I reward those who diligently seek me. He turned to face me fully, and his eyes were blazing with intensity again. But Jonathan, you need to give them a specific deadline, not just 90 days from whenever you start, a specific date, because the Kairos moment is now. The window is open now, and if they delay, if they wait, if they convince themselves they'll start next month or next year, the opportunity for this specific season will pass. He paused, and then he said, "Tell them this. They have until February 26th, 2026, exactly 30 days from when you're releasing this message. That's their deadline to commit to the 90-day process. Not to complete it, to commit to it, to make the decision, to take the first step, to begin the daily encounters, to identify the next step, to eliminate the first light dimmer, to reach out to potential tribe members. 30 days to start. And if they don't start within those 30 days, they're not going to start. They'll convince themselves they will, but they won't. The urgency will fade, the hunger will dim, and they'll slip back into the comfortable, conventional Christian life that's slowly killing them. The weight of that deadline hit me like a physical force. February 26th, 2026, 30 days. It felt both generous and terrifyingly short. Lord, I said, what if they're scared? What if they don't feel ready? What if they don't know where to start? He smiled, and it was full of compassion. Then they start scared, they start unready, they start confused, but they start. Because starting is what separates the chosen ones who fulfill their calling from the chosen ones who die with their light dimmed. Starting is the act of faith that releases my power. Starting is the declaration that they trust me more than they trust their feelings. Starting is the recognition of the sign and the response to it. He began to walk along the canyon rim, and I walked beside him. Let me tell you what's going to happen when they commit to this. In the first 30 days, they're going to face resistance like they've never experienced before. The enemy is going to throw everything at them: distractions, discouragement, doubt, delays. Their circumstances might actually get worse before they get better. People might question them, criticize them, try to talk them out of it. They might feel like they're going crazy, like they made a mistake, like they misheard me. He stopped walking and looked at me. But if they push through that first 30 days, if they keep showing up for the daily encounter, if they keep taking the next steps, if they keep eliminating the light dimmers, if they keep pursuing their tribe, something will shift. They'll break through the resistance. They'll enter a new level of clarity, of authority, of anointing, and by day 60, they'll look back and barely recognize the person they were at day 1. And by day 90, they'll be walking in a dimension of their calling that they couldn't even imagine right now. He turned back toward the canyon, and the first hints of dawn were beginning to touch the eastern horizon, turning the sky from black to deep purple. But here's what I need you to emphasize, Jonathan. Here's what they need to understand. This isn't a formula. This isn't a program. This isn't a guarantee that if they do A, B, and C, then I'll do X, Y, and Z. I'm not a vending machine. I'm a father. And what I'm offering them isn't a transaction. It's a relationship. The daily encounter, the next steps, the elimination of light dimmers, the tribe, the deadline. These aren't hoops to jump through to earn my favor. They're the practical expression of a heart that's recognized the sign and is responding to it. The sky was lightening rapidly now, the stars beginning to fade, and I could see the details of the canyon emerging from the darkness, the layers of red rock, the distant formations, the vast expanse that had been hidden in the night. Some of them, Jesus continued, are going to do everything I've outlined, and their circumstances still won't change immediately. The doors might stay closed, the resources might not come, the clarity might remain elusive, and they're going to be tempted to think it didn't work, that they did something wrong, that they're still not really chosen. He turned to me and his voice was fierce. Tell them this: the breakthrough isn't always external. Sometimes the breakthrough is internal. Sometimes the breakthrough is that they develop the character, the faith, the endurance, the authority that they're going to need for the calling. Sometimes the breakthrough is that their light stops dimming and starts growing brighter, even if nothing in their circumstances has changed yet. Sometimes the breakthrough is that they learn to find their identity in being chosen by me rather than celebrated by people. The sun broke over the horizon, and suddenly the entire canyon was bathed in golden light. The red rocks seemed to glow from within, and the vast expanse that had been dark and mysterious all night was revealed in all its glory, massive, ancient, breathtaking. Jesus spread his arms wide, encompassing the entire scene. This is what I'm doing with my chosen ones. Right now, they're in the darkness. They can sense the vastness of their calling, but they can't see it clearly. They know there's something significant ahead, but the details are hidden. They feel the depth of it, but they can't measure it. But the sun is rising, Jonathan. The season is shifting. And those who have kept their lights burning through the darkness, those who have recognized the sign and responded to it, those who have embraced the wilderness and trusted the process, they're about to see their calling revealed in full daylight. They're about to step into the purpose they've been prepared for. They're about to take the territories they've been assigned. He lowered his arms and looked at me one final time. But they have to start. They have to commit. They have to respond to the sign, and they have to do it now, not later, because the Kairos moment is here. The window is open, and I'm calling my chosen ones to step through it. He began to fade then, not dramatically, but gradually, like morning mist dissolving in the sunlight. His final words hung in the air. Tell them I love them. Tell them I've never stopped believing in them, even when they stop believing in themselves. Tell them the sign is real, the calling is real, the mark is real, and tell them I'm waiting for them to respond. I'm waiting for them to start. I'm waiting for them to step into everything I've prepared for them. And then he was gone, and I was alone on the canyon rim, watching the sun rise over the vast expanse, feeling the warmth on my face, and carrying the weight of the message he'd given me to deliver. So here we are. You've heard the entire encounter. You've seen what's at stake. You've received the practical steps, and now you have a choice to make. You can scroll past this. You can dismiss it as religious enthusiasm or creative storytelling. You can convince yourself that you'll respond later when you feel more ready, when the timing is better, when you have more clarity. And if you make that choice, I can't stop you. But I need you to understand what you're choosing. You're choosing to let your light dim. You're choosing to ignore the sign. You're choosing to walk away from the calling that's been burning in your chest, maybe for years. Or you can recognize the sign. You can acknowledge that the hunger you feel, the restlessness, the sense that you're meant for more, that's not a problem. That's the mark. That's the evidence. That's Jesus confirming your calling in this very moment. And if you recognize the sign, then you need to respond to it. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when you feel more ready. Now, here's what I'm asking you to do. First, commit to the 30-minute daily encounter starting tomorrow morning. Set your alarm. Find a place where you won't be disturbed. Bring your Bible, bring a journal, but most importantly, bring yourself. Show up, be present, feed the hunger. Do this every single day for the next 90 days. No exceptions, no excuses. Second, within the next 72 hours, identify your next step and take it. Spend time in prayer today or tomorrow asking Jesus, what's the next step? What's the one thing you're asking me to do right now? And when you hear it, and you will hear it, take action immediately. Don't overthink it. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Just obey. Third, this week, identify one light dimmer and eliminate it. Ask Jesus, what's dimming my light right now? It might be a relationship, a habit, a thought pattern, a commitment, a sin. Whatever it is, be brave enough to cut it off. Be ruthless about protecting your light. Fourth, within the next 2 weeks, reach out to at least 3 potential tribe members. These are people who you sense are also marked, also hungry, also committed to more than conventional Christianity. Send them a message, have a conversation, be vulnerable about your journey, start building your tribe. Fifth, right now, before you do anything else, make the commitment. Say out loud, I commit to the 90-day process. I commit to the daily encounter, to taking the next steps, to eliminating the light dimmers, to finding my tribe. I commit to responding to the sign. I recognize that I am chosen, I am marked, and I refuse to let my light go out. And then comment below, I'm committed. February 26, 2026 is my deadline. I need to see who's really hearing this. I need to know who's making the commitment because I'm going to follow up. I'm going to check in. I'm going to create a community for those who are serious about this, who are really responding to the sign. But more importantly, Jesus needs to know, not because he doesn't already know, he does, but because your declaration, your commitment, your response to the sign, that's what releases his power in your life. That's what opens the doors. That's what activates the calling. Let me be brutally honest with you. Most people who watch this won't do anything. They'll feel inspired for a moment, maybe even emotional, but then they'll go back to their regular lives and convince themselves they'll respond later. And their lights will continue to dim, and they'll continue to wonder why they feel so empty, so unfulfilled, so far from the purpose they know they were created for. Don't be most people. You've been marked. You've been chosen. The sign has been given. The calling is real. And the window is open right now. But it won't stay open forever. February 26th, 2026. That's your deadline, 30 days from now. If you don't start within those 30 days, you're not going to start. The urgency will fade, the hunger will dim, and you'll slip back into the comfortable numbness that's been slowly killing you. I went back to that canyon yesterday afternoon, and I stood at the rim in the daylight, and I remembered everything Jesus showed me, and I made a commitment. I'm not going to let this message die. I'm not going to let the chosen ones miss their moment because I was too afraid to share what I experienced, too concerned about what people would think, too worried about being misunderstood. So I'm sharing it all. Every detail, every word, every vision. And I'm trusting that the ones who are truly marked will recognize the truth in it. Something in their spirit will respond. The hunger will intensify, and they'll make the commitment. Are you one of them? The canyon is still there, vast and ancient and beautiful. The sun rises over it every morning, revealing what was hidden in the darkness. And that's what's about to happen in your life if you'll respond to the sign. The calling that's been hidden, the purpose that's been unclear, the destiny that's been waiting, it's about to be revealed. But you have to start. You have to commit. You have to respond. 30 days. February 26th, 2026. That's your deadline. The sign has been given. The question is, will you recognize it? Comment below right now. I'm committed. And then start. Tomorrow morning, 30 minutes. Daily encounter. Next step within 72 hours. Light dimmer eliminated this week. Tribe members contacted within 2 weeks. 90 days from now, you won't recognize yourself. You'll look back at this moment and realize it was the turning point. The moment when you stopped letting your light dim and started walking in your calling. But only if you start, only if you commit, only if you respond to the sign. I'm praying for you. Jesus is waiting for you. Your calling is ready for you. Now it's your turn. Respond.